Let me get into something about things. Love. You know, one thing I've learned is to give unconditional love. You know what unconditional love is? It means no conditions. It's like just a choice. I love you. See, the world of imagination is, to me, the more real world. The world of imagination is the more real world. Maybe that's one of the reasons why, to me, believing in God is easy. Because God is imaginary, and imaginary is real. I see imaginary as real. So I can imagine loving people that I meet for the first time. And if I imagine I love you, I do love you. And if I imagine I don't love you, then I don't love you. If I imagine I hate you, then I hate you. Whatever I imagine, that's what's real. In the past, I was afraid to actually say stuff like that. But that's what I've always believed. I've always believed. It's not like I just suddenly realized it. It's just that I realized that was so crazy to say it that nobody would, people would just, oh my God, everybody would just run for cover. The fat families would come after you. The old man's political protection would run for cover. Yeah, that's right. People would run for the hills the minute I say that. I say that the imaginary world is more real. But that's not so strange. Not that I need verification, but this is close to what Carl Jung was saying. The imaginary world is more real than the real world. Which doesn't make sense. A better way to make it make sense is to say that the imaginary world is the real world. And the real world is the imaginary world. See, when you're in the middle of a dream, you dream. And you're attached to that world. And in that dream, while you're dreaming, in the parenthesis of time that you're dreaming, everything in that dream is real. Until you wake up. When you wake up and you're in this other world, you look at that world, and that world, the dream world that you looked at in the past, that a minute ago you were dreaming, all that stuff is unreal. This world now is real. But when you're in the middle of the dream world, that other world doesn't even exist. You don't even think about the other world. It's non-existent. You become detached from one world to the other. When you go from one world of existence to another world of existence, the other world is not real. It's only the current world that's real. But what makes it real is because you imagine it's real. You think this is real. You simply assess it as being real. That's the very essence of real. It's not what you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, because you're seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling things in your dream. And you're doing that now. So it's not real. It's not real. It's just imaginary. You imagine it because you assess it to be real. But it is real. See, there's a bit of a contradiction, if you want to put it that way, or paradox. Contradiction and paradox are not the same thing. I tend to think of it as a paradox. The real world is imaginary. The world of imagination is just as real to me. And there's even a little bit of science behind that. Because when people imagine doing something, it affects the real world. But we make that dichotomy of real world and imaginary world. And I think about that article I remember reading when Einstein was talking about something, and he talked about real. He used the word real in quotation marks, and then he explained why he used the quotation marks because as he said, the philosophical police are still out on that top topic. He should have said the philosophical jury, because in a way we don't know for sure. We just assume that the real world is the world we take in through our senses. In a world that we think of when we dream of something. If I fantasize about eating some ice cream, That's not real. We call that, but the difference between one and the other of being real and not real is a matter of simply labeling and accepting. Not so much what our senses tell us, but labeling and accepting. This is in harmony with what a lot of stuff that David Hume talked about and a lot of other philosophers. So it's not just pure nuts or being crazy or just coming up with stuff. We are so used to just thinking about the real world as being the world that we take in through our senses. Then that's sort of like, we accept that. We sort of go along with that. There's a kind of consensus reality issue that of course, that's the real world. We're in consensus with that. But if we should ever change our mind collectively and think that the world of dreams and imagination and fantasy is real, then it becomes real. It just is a shifting of the standard. That's all. A mental shift, not a physical shift. That's the difference between real and unreal. It's a matter of where the shift is. Now, I know a lot of people will probably criticize me and say, well, that's where crazy people in a crazy house. Maybe they aren't crazy. Maybe we're the crazy ones. It's just a thought to think about. And maybe I'm the crazy one. Or maybe those who think different, maybe they're the crazy ones. I don't know. There really is no standard. It's just something we just imagine as a standard, which is imaginary. We imagine a standard. So I guess we're all crazy collectively. It's just some of us have power to lock people away and some of us don't.